From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Wednesday, July the 23rd, 2025. The IDF continues its operations in Gaza, locating and destroying, it said, above ground and underground terror infrastructure while defending the area. Saying also that over the past day, the Air Force struck approximately 120 terror targets across the Gaza Strip, including terrorist squads, military buildings, combat tunnels, and booby-trapped buildings. Israel's President Isaac Herzog visited Israeli troops in Gaza today and received an operational update on the situation from senior officers. The Times of Israel reporting the president was also shown the humanitarian aid mechanism in Gaza, which some have harshly criticized, claiming it does not meet the humanitarian needs in the Gaza Strip. Though Israel has maintained that the aid is being allowed into Gaza, the issue is making sure Gazans were receiving the aid. The president said, "We are acting here and providing humanitarian aid in accordance with international law. Those trying to sabotage that aid are Hamas and its operatives, who are willing to do anything to stop our forces from dismantling infrastructure that could harm us and our civilians." Well, New York Times opinion columnist Bret Stephens published a piece in the Times yesterday countering the accusation that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Titled, "No, Israel is not committing genocide in Gaza," Stephens lays out a number of facts, including that Israel takes many steps to minimize civilian harm. He writes, "It could have bombed without prior notice, instead of routinely warning Gazans to evacuate areas it intended to strike. It could have bombed without putting its own soldiers, hundreds of whom have died in combat, at risk." Stephens writes, "The war in Gaza should be brought to an end in a way that ensures it is never repeated. To call it a genocide does nothing to advance that aim, except to dilute the meaning of a word we cannot afford to cheapen." Stephens spoke further with the Times on who bears moral responsibility for what is happening in Gaza, which he says is clearly Hamas.
Hamas, first of all, broke a ceasefire that obtained on October 6th, 2023 in the cruelest way. Hamas hides behind, between, and beneath their own civilian population, the very opposite of the way other countries fight wars where they protect civilians and put their armed soldiers forward. And Hamas could end this at any moment of its choosing. So it's a little bit frustrating for those of us who are supporters of Israel to hear people who simply just discount the idea that Hamas bears the lion's share of responsibility for the suffering that they have inflicted on their own people by starting a war they should never have started and by pursuing that war in the cruelest way possible.
Columbia University today announced disciplinary measures regarding several anti-Israel incidents on its campus. Most recently, when anti-Israel protesters took over part of Butler Library in May of this year, and the anti-Israel encampment during Alumni Weekend in the spring of last year. The University Judicial Board said the sanctions from Butler Library include probation, suspensions ranging from 1 year to 3 years, degree revocations, and expulsions. Writing, "Our institution must focus on delivering on its academic mission for our community. And to create a thriving academic community, there must be respect for each other and the institution's fundamental work, policies, and rules. Disruptions to academic activities are in violation of university policies and rules, and such violations will necessarily generate consequences." Well, Wonder Woman herself is in Israel. Israeli actress Gal Gadot met yesterday with former hostages Doron Steinbrecher, Liri Albag, Naama Levy, Moran Stella Yanai, and Ilana Grzycki. Gadot telling the young women how incredible they are, that she was in awe of them, of their strength and their spirit in surviving and carrying on and continuing to fight for those still in captivity. The 50 hostages who are still being held by terror group Hamas in Gaza have now been captive for 656 days. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Wednesday, July the 23rd at 7 o'clock. David Harris speaks with David Kaufman, editor and columnist for the New York Post and a strong voice for Israel. At 7:30, it's Good Week Israel. At 8, Matthew Dallek and Kenneth Jacobson explore the fluctuating strength of fascism after 1945 in the U.S. and Europe and how Jewish and non-Jewish groups responded to them. At 9, Charles Cohen is on L'chaim. At 10, it's the ILTV's Insider. At 10:30, an encore of the news. And coming up next, it's Thinking Out Loud. And that's the JBS News Update for Wednesday, July the 23rd, 2025. I'm Teisha Bader. Am Yisrael Chai.